lecture, we're going to put it all together. This is really exciting. This is where we really get to use the model and think about the model in a little bit more of an interesting way. So let's start with the economy in equilibrium. So we're going to just draw a graph here. And up here we put price level, GDPR. And of course you can always use Y as well. And we're going to start with LRAS. We always are going to start with LRAS because that's going to help us figure out, is the economy in an expansion? Is it in a contraction or a recession? Is it just in long run? Now, if it's here, right, if we are here, that's the idea that we are at the long run equilibrium. And the economy is going to be operating where AD and short run aggregate supply intercept. So in this picture, all three lines cross. The current level of prices in the economy is PLE, and the current level of output is YE. And this tells us that this economy, because SRAS equals AD at LRAS, if these two lines are equal to each other where they cross at LRAS, that the economy is in long run equilibrium. So we're not in a recession, we're not in an expansion. A way to think about it, right, and we're going to do this later as well, is if you have a business cycle and you have a trend line, and you go up and down and up and down, you are right here. You're right where the actual level of output crosses the trend line. Okay? So this is the idea that if we're here, at this point, point A here is equal to the same thing as point A here. It's the same point. And it could be over here as well, point A, or it could be here, point A. Okay? Now that we know the equilibrium, we're going to talk about what happens when you have a gap. And a gap is the idea that we are not operating at YE. So we're going to start with here. We're going to start with here, GDPR and PL. And what we're actually going to do each time is we're going to start in the long run, and then we're going to move out of it. So we're going to say the first is aggregate demand, and then we're going to say aggregate short run aggregate supply. And we're going to say that there's going to be an expansionary gap. I'm just labeling here. Expansionary gap caused by aggregate demand going up. Now what happens if aggregate demand increases? That curve shifts to the right, AD1. Now where's our output? Output is here, Y1. What about happened to prices? Prices, PL1. So prices went up in the economy and the level of output went up. So we'd say price levels increased and output increased if AD increases. Pretty important stuff. Now we see there's a gap between YE and Y1. That's called the expansionary gap. And so that, right, if we said this is point B, and we used to have this point A here, point B would be like operating up here, right? You're operating outside a little bit beyond, okay? Now let's take a look at an expansionary gap caused by SRAS increasing. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so GDPR, price level, and we're going to put the LRAS here. And again, we're going to start at the equilibrium, and we're going to work our way out of it to see what happens. So we start here at YE and PLE, and then we said SRAS goes up. Maybe resource prices got cheaper, right? Maybe resource prices got cheaper. And if that happened, if resource prices got cheaper, then businesses are going to produce more. Costs are down, so they're going to produce more, and so output rises. Notice that the output increased. But what happened to the price levels in the economy? They decreased. Price levels went down, but output went up. This is actually a really good thing. This doesn't necessarily mean that we had deflation necessarily, but it can actually mean that we kept prices stable while we increased output. So you could see that by juicing the economy, if you just increase government spending, you're going to increase aggregate demand, and one of the results would be inflation. And that output comes at a cost of higher inflation. But if you can get output to rise at the same time, so at the same time more people have jobs, right? More people are working when you go from YE to Y1. At the same time, stuff is getting cheaper in the economy and we're producing more. That's like the Goldilocks zone. This is really great, right? This is awesome. We're going to say, awesome, woo, if we can do that. That's pretty good. because we don't want this higher inflation levels necessarily with more output. This would be really good. So we're going to say output goes up and price levels go down if SRAS increases. Now let's take a look at recessions. So we're going to say the first recession that we're going to deal with is happening because aggregate demand went down, okay? Caused by aggregate demand decreasing. So my pen's starting to run out on me. Hopefully you can see that. Aggregate demand, short-run aggregate supply, and LRAS. So we're always starting here in this problem set in the long run. Okay, so we have YE, PLE, and we said aggregate demand falls. Okay, so maybe consumer spending fell. So we'd say that consumers lost confidence in the economy. So they didn't spend as much money. So now we're going to drop the amount of output. We can see output fell. Poor people lost their jobs because of that output falling, and at the same time, deflation happened. So that's bad. This is called a recession. So price levels are down and output is down. This is your standard run-of-the-mill recession. And so the 2008, right? This was 2008. This was 1929, right? This was the Panic of 1873. There's tons of them out there, right? This is, let's see, 2001, there was one then. There was one in 1991. There were tons of them out there. These are recessions, some of which are really, really bad, right? Lower price levels, lower output, lots of people lose their jobs. But this one is a special kind of recession. This is called a stagflation recession. And this one is because SRAS goes down. We're going to see why this one is a nasty one. This one's just terrible. Now, take a look here. Price level, GDP, aggregate demand, short-run aggregate supply, and long run. And by the way, you need this long run curve because otherwise you can't tell if you're in a recession or an expansion. You don't know. The gap is what actually tells us. So we need YE and PLE. And we said SRAS decreases. So we're going to shift that to the left. So SRAS 1. That's a little small, sorry. Now if that happens, where's our new output? Okay, out here. Output down. Millions of people just lost their jobs. Okay, but what happened to prices? Oh man, this is the worst. That's just rotten, right? You lose your job and prices go up at the same time. If SRAS goes down, that's really bad. This is what we call stagflation. The idea is the economy is stagnant like a pool that's not moving, right? It's not growing. And so it's stagnant and inflation. So we have inflation and a stagnant economy. It's the worst. And we had this in the United States from roughly 1972 to like 1981. It was one long, nasty one with maybe a handful of breaks in between. But the 1970s were just rotten for this kind of stuff. And now, and we're going to talk about why it's even worse, about the fact that you lose your job and prices are higher. We'll talk about that the economy can't even correct itself from this kind of thing. Once it gets stuck into this, it's just kind of stuck there, as opposed to the recessionary gaps where there's a possibility where the economy can actually correct itself. Now, we're going to look at those in a future video. Hopefully, this video has helped you make sense of some of the details of equilibrium, and I'll see you next time.